All right, so indirect. Indirect, as it implies, uses an extra step. Okay, it is not a direct conversion. Okay, so something you should remember is energy can change forms, simply put. Okay, an X-ray can be converted into visible light as long as the visible light that's created has the same total energy. Like if you made one X-ray photon and split it into 4 visible light photons, well, those 4 visible light photons added all together will have the same energy as the original X-ray photon did. Okay, so you can convert energy into different forms, X-rays into visible light, as long as the total amount of energy is conserved. This is a law you probably have heard of as called the law of the conservation of energy. Okay. So indirect conversion systems take advantage of this. So indirect conversion, developed before direct conversion, uses something called amorphous silicon. Again, amorphous just means that it's not in a crystal form. Okay, because you can get crystallized selenium, crystallized silicon, but this is more like a powder. That's what the detector's surface is made of. It's made of silicon rather than selenium. And yeah, you've got to remember which one uses which, okay? Because you will be asked that on our tests and state exams. They love to ask those questions.
What question?
Which systems use which materials? Like, for example, direct conversion uses selenium, where indirect conversion uses silicon. And you gotta just as a brute fact remember that. Yep. Okay. So silicon is sensitive as a semiconductor, sensitive to visible light. Okay. An indirect conversion system has the same active matrix array, the same deck cells. Okay. Just those deck cells, the material in them is replaced. Selenium is replaced with silicon. And on top of the deck cells, there is a layer of something called a scintillator screen. What you need to know about scintillator screens is scintillator screens convert one type of electromagnetic energy into another. So if you want to just get the basics, scintillation is converting one type of electromagnetic radiation into another. For example, X-rays being converted into visible light. You could also refer to them as a phosphor screen because phosphorescence is something giving off light when it is struck by another type of light. For example, when X-rays strike this phosphor screen, the phosphor screen absorbs the X-rays and emits visible light. Yes, you have to remember the material that the phosphor screens are made of. There's 2 options, cesium iodide or gadolinium oxysulfide. Okay. So from top to bottom, you've already seen, right? You've already seen that, okay? But before, that deck cell was being struck by X-rays, right? Now, that deck cell is being struck by visible light. And again, the way it works is, shown in green at the top of the screen, you have that X-ray photon coming in. That X-ray photon is channeled down, and so that top layer of the phosphor screen, cesium iodide, gadolinium oxysulfide, whatever material it is, it's made of these really, they're not this tall, they're about 4 microns, they're teeny tiny, but they're crystals. So on top of the detector element is a layer of these crystals, all arranged in such a way where they will capture and guide the photons downward. Okay, that's why they're being shown as these vertical like rods. Anyways, when an X-ray photon strikes these crystals, okay, the X-ray photon is absorbed and converted into several photons of visible light. Okay? The visible light photons will travel down the crystal and strike the detector surface. The visible light photons are what actually creates the current in the DECSIL, getting the exposure to be stored on the capacitor. But again, it's visible light that's actually exposing the DECSIL. This is why it's called indirect conversion, because you're taking X-rays and converting them into visible light and then converting that into electric current. Whereas direct conversion was directly from X-rays to electric current. Which do you think is more efficient? Probably direct, right? Because there's not an extra step involved, right? And so you're absolutely right. Direct conversion is more efficient. Indirect conversion is less efficient. Indirect conversion is less efficient and has lower spatial resolution, because where a single X-ray photon would have struck the detector element, now you have a single X-ray photon emitting several visible light photons that all spread out. Okay, and so your spatial resolution is said to be a little bit lower than it could be with direct. So this is an electron microscope image of these crystals. So they actually do look like this. This is a picture of the crystals. So the vertical crystals form light channels that confine the lateral dispersion of the light somewhat. Okay. However, the final resolution achieved is still not as good as with direct. So it's less efficient. It has extra materials, and it has less spatial resolution. But it was the first one to be developed, and it's cheaper. Okay. So let's compare a little bit. Comparing indirect and direct. Direct conversion produces higher spatial resolution because there's no spreading of light. X-ray photons simply strike detector. Indirect conversion results in less patient dose because you take X-rays and turn them into many photons, and the photons are what expose the receptor. So you can get it done with lower patient exposure. Both things are still desirable, so it's up to individual facilities on what they buy, right? Do you want to buy the system that gives you better spatial resolution but sacrifices patient dose? Or do you want the system that takes into account we can lower patient dose by losing a little bit of spatial resolution? And so different systems used for different reasons. This is why indirect is still around. It's because its patient dose is actually a little lower. Okay.